Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with George H.W. Bush, the original Bush, the OG Bush that will be elected, of course, in 1988. He's the incumbent vice president under Ronald Reagan, and with that, he rides that wave right into the presidency. We'll pick up with looking at 3 unit focus questions that will have: what effect did the Nixon presidency have on America's public psyche? Why did conservatism become such an attractive philosophy in the United States? And then describe the effect of technology and scientific innovation on the increased globalization of the United States. We also have our vocabulary here, and as we said, go ahead and write down these terms, of course, in your journal, and as you and define them yourselves or identify them yourself. And as we see them, of course, as they come up in the lesson and the content, we'll try to address as many of them as we can. All right, we're going to start with 2 lesson focus questions that we will center on today. What effect did Gorbachev's introduction of glasnost in the Soviet Union have on the Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe? And what issue cost George H. Bush the election of 1992? Our journal topic, what we want you to do, of course, is write down the following statement and then tell us what you think. My opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will. Congress will push me to raise taxes and I'll say no. And they'll push and I'll say no. And they'll push again and I'll say to them, read my lips, no new taxes. What do you think the political fallout would be if that promise made by George H.W. Bush during his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention was made today by a presidential candidate? Could a president, emerge as being successful for a re-election bid if he broke his promise to the American public? With that, go ahead, take a few minutes and tell us what you think. Well, I don't know if a president today can get away with lying to the American public, especially as they so emphatically said what they wouldn't do, and if they went back on their word and did it. I know that because of this particular promise, and when the election of 1992 rolls around, and George H.W. Bush is up for re-election, he will not win the election of 1992 and will be defeated by William Jefferson Clinton, and partially because of this failed promise. All right, let's look at the election of 1988. In the election of 1988, Vice President George H.W. Bush defeated Democrat Michael Dukakis and third-party candidate who ran as an independent, Jesse Jackson. Upon election, Bush had to deal with the deterioration of the Soviet Union. New Soviet Premier Gorbachev instituted glasnost and perestroika to save the Soviet Union, but his efforts failed. Eastern European nations revolted and ended communism in their nations. November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall falls and serves as a monument to the end of the Iron Curtain and the Communist Eastern Bloc. In August 1991, Gorbachev was arrested after a coup attempt. President Boris Yeltsin defied the coup, and Mikhail Gorbachev was returned to power. But communism ended with all 15 of the Soviet republics declaring their independence. And in December of 1991, the Soviet Union was no more. President Bush also appointed Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court despite contentious Senate judiciary hearings where he was accused of sexual harassment by Anita Hill. Sexual harassment, for the first time, of course, is brought out into the light, in American politics, of course, and in American business settings. So we're going to find that, businesses and agencies throughout the rest of the country, of course, will start drafting these policies, of course, to protect individuals in the workplace. On the left, you have the Democrat, Michael Dukakis, and on the right, independent Jesse Jackson from Operation Push fame. Here's a picture of the Berlin Wall at the Brandenburg Gate right after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and this serves as a symbol to the end of communism in the Soviet Union. On the left, you have the Soviet premier that oversees and survives the downfall, of course, of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, and his president, who succeeds him as the prime minister or premier of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. On the left, you have Clarence Thomas, who emerges as the second African-American to become a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. And then his accuser that testified during the Senate confirmation hearings, Anita Hill, who detailed her story of sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas. It's one of those periods of of real contention in American politics, and we're going to find that people are going to fall on one side or the other, and it doesn't really do a whole lot for either side during that particular time. It's going to put a little bit of a black eye, on the American government with that whole situation. December 1991, the Cold War ends. The United States under President Bush would encounter other challenges. China's repression of democratic ideas with violence at Tiananmen Square was an instance in which many believe Bush should have taken a stronger stance against China. Two successes of the Bush foreign policy occurred in Panama with the arrest of Manuel Noriega and the Persian Gulf War, in which the United States and the United Nations removed the Iraqis after they invaded Kuwait in 1991 during Operation Desert Storm. But even with his successes, people are going to feel like that, President Bush Sr. doesn't do enough. Like in the instance, of course, with China, a lot of people feel like that the United States of America should have taken a stronger role in China. And by doing that, what we probably could have done is that we could have overseen the fall of the Soviet Union and possibly China, in a lot of people's mind, in the same decade or so. And then in terms of looking at Operation Desert Storm, it's successful removing the Iraqis from Kuwait, but a lot of people felt like that what we should have done is do even more and go through and take out Saddam Hussein, who was the leader of Iraq at that time. And a lot of people felt like that we would end up going back to Iraq and fighting another war had Bush Sr. been a little bit more on the ball about taking more action in foreign policy. Here we have the Tiananmen Square protest, and once again, a lot of people feel like the United States of America lost a chance to really put some pressure on China to end communism there. At this time, we will pause and view a video on the Persian Gulf War, its lasting effects on the United States and the Middle East. And you can access this video from the lesson description. Upon viewing the video, complete the activities which accompany the video, convert your work into a PDF, and turn it into your teacher course before a grade. Good luck and enjoy the video. Hope you enjoyed that video course on Operation Desert Storm. And one of the things that we're going to find that the United States of America during this particular war we flex our muscles and we show that we are the premier nation, of course, in the world. And when we go through and we liberate the Kuwait from the Iraqi control, the only thing that people can't agree on is that we didn't go far enough. We're going to have generals like Colin Powell who will say that we did enough, and then we'll have people, of course, that say that we didn't do enough there and we should have gone on and removed Saddam Hussein at that time. All right, the election of 1992. Now, we told you that in most cases, incumbent presidents, when they get the nomination from their party, in most cases go on to be reelected. In the case of George H.W. Bush in 1992, it goes sideways from that. He's going to get the nomination, of course, from his party, but he'll be defeated by William Jefferson Clinton. George Bush was successful in foreign policy stage of his presidency. His failure to reduce the deficit, breaking his campaign promise not to raise taxes, missed opportunities in China and Iraq, and the recession that began in 1990 cost Bush the election in 1992. It's important to point out that some of this is not Bush. Some of this is where the chickens are coming home to roost. During the Reagan administration, we spent, increased the deficit, and then we expected Bush, of course, to do everything to kind of undo all that in 4 years that he becomes president. And then, oh, by the way, you got to fight a war, of course, in Iraq. William Jefferson Clinton, governor of Arkansas, earned the Democratic nomination in 1992 and won the election with 43% of the vote, popular vote. H. Ross Perot was the third-party candidate whose grassroots campaign garnered 19% of the vote, siphoning some of the support away from Bush. So it's not only the fact that Bush, of course, had some missteps, but we also have a third-party candidate that's also involved in it. And he's going to take a huge bite out of that Bush popular vote and allow Clinton the opportunity to win. And something happens in 1992 that not many people had seen before. I don't know if anybody had seen this before, but in 1992, we have a presidential debate. On the left, you have George H.W. Bush, who's the president of the United States of America. In the middle, you have H. Ross Perot, who's a billionaire from Texas. And then you have William Jefferson Clinton over here, who wins the election. The odd thing about this election, this debate, is the fact that you don't have just the two major party candidates that are debating. You have an independent that's thrown in also. And because of his elevation to that stage, it hurts President Bush and it benefits the Democratic nominee, Clinton. All right, lesson focus questions. What effect did Gorbachev's introduction of glasnost in the Soviet Union have on the satellites in Eastern Europe? And what issues cost George H. Bush the election in 1992? Well, what effect did the introduction of glasnost in the Soviet Union have on the Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe? It encouraged more political freedom and emboldened Soviet satellites to seek independence. So, and basically what it did is it relaxed the Soviet control over those satellites, and because they saw that as a perceived sign of weakness, we're going to find that those satellite states of Eastern Europe are going to pull away and break away, like Poland, Czechoslovakia. So we're going to see a lot of those, Belarus, Ukraine. We're going to see a lot of those types of places, break away from the Soviet Union. It sparked call for democracy and led to the collapse of communist regimes throughout Eastern Europe. What issues cost George H. Bush the election of 1992? The economic recession, high unemployment, and the rising deficit. The no new taxes, broken promise damaged his credibility, and the third-party candidacy of H. Ross Perot siphoned some of his support, his Republican support. All right, what that does, of course, is it ends lesson number 9. And what we hope to do, of course, is to give you some insights about the George H.W. Bush presidency. And we're going to find that Bush accomplishes some great things as president of the United States of America. It'll only be because of a few missteps that he won't be able to, to survive and be reelected in 1992. And then Clinton's popularity, and then H. Ross Perot's, his invitation. I wouldn't say invitation, but his candidacy, kind of kills Bush's hopes. This is Coach Anderson, Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 Press. Remember what I always tell you, don't take my word for it, do your own research, and by doing your own research, you can draw your own conclusion. And with that, I'll see you next time.